Hello, welcome to the Angry, Annoyed, and Amused podcast. You're on with Mike. So next to me is Matt.
What's up?
Over there's Johnny.
Yo, yo.
Across the table is the other Mike.
Hello.
Johnny, you want to take this one away?
Yeah, when am I taking it?
What's your thing? I honestly forgot again, so I was just hoping you would pick it up.
Too many margaritas. You've been drinking it for a week straight.
Nah, it's just this one idea for whatever reason is not sticking in my head.
I know this is like
I'm
the
just
third time we
blanking on
talked
it.
about
I know.
it.
I can't remember.
We are basically going to speak about. I don't know what you're doing.
It's annoying, ain't it?
No, it wasn't annoying. I didn't know someone was doing it. I thought I was hearing things in my head again. I'm like, oh no, they're back.
Again.
I was like, shit. I thought I was cured. I just want to talk about the world and the divide we're at, and how to me it seems bigger. I see it on the internet and the news, which is my TikTok, as I've referenced many times, and I see it driving around my house, not my house, my neighborhood, and I see those signs. I have one person in particular has a sign. The sign's like a half a mile long. It's like Black Lives Matter, no one's illegal. No gay people. I'm like, oh my god! If I read this sign, I'd crack.
That's a funny.
It's
Black
If
Lives
that's literally
Matter.
what it
No
says.
one's illegal. Gay people.
If
That's a
If
funny.
that's actually
Put
what
that
it
on a
says,
shirt.
I hope that sign shows up on the green
If that's
screen.
actually
there's so many things on that. But and then like again, I see it, and I'm just like, I don't know. I feel like I'm me, and I have my like the things I believe in that I'm really hard like. A big believer in, and then there's things I don't really give a shit about, but I feel like I can have a conversation with anybody and understand both sides and hear it and talk about. But then there's so many people in this world that are like so not that, and we're butting heads over the shittiest, stupidest reasons, and it's confusing to me. And I just want to talk it out for a little while because it doesn't make sense to me. And the other part of this, and I also want to deep into this, we can, because we have all these people that protest, and they go protest all the dumbest things, and I think we've mentioned this on a podcast too. Like we'll go to a school and wreck a school to protest Gaza. I'm not saying the Gaza thing's bullshit, but how they do it and where they do it and why they do it there doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, we have a whole country of things here that need to be fixed, like a lot of things. And as a unit, if we did some of that, maybe we can get a change. And I'm like, why are you not fighting for those changes?
That's it. That's why.
That's why, and it
So-
comes. All right, podcast
Because
goes.
If we were a unit,
Yeah.
we'd be able
We've
to change
talked about
things.
this.
and that's-
Exactly.
that's why it
We've
is.
touched on this before
Yeah.
in the political sense. I maintain that we are not as divided as people say.
Okay.
I say this all the time. I think the people that are out there making all the noise are a small minority of people. I think most people get along the way you said. I can talk to anybody about what their beliefs are, but I don't need to hate them.
Yeah.
Right? I could understand that that's their beliefs. And
Absolutely.
I could accept that. As far as the protesting thing, I do believe that some of that protesting is paid for.
Yeah.
Those people are paid to go out there and make, as much mess as they possibly can. So I don't think those people necessarily truly believe in the causes that they're out there protesting. So that's kind of my take on it. I don't think we're as divided of a country as people are trying to make us believe we are.
I think an interesting point of it that I was thinking about when you were saying this sign that says so many things is I think that why a lot of people feel that way with the divide is, and I've realized this like very recently, like only in the last year, is it seems now that everybody wants you, not even wants themselves, but just wants you to have an opinion on everything.
Right.
You can't, like you were saying, like, oh, there's some things I'm not really,
Right.
like, not really into. They want you to.
They want you to have
want
something.
You to say that
Yeah, how do you
have-
feel about
and
that?
That
I
I
don't
think
care.
drives the divide, because when you're forced to make a decision, you're gonna say things that you don't necessarily 100% agree with.
Right.
And then it sparks a whole tangent argument that you didn't even want to get into, because originally your answer was, I actually don't. This isn't something I know about or want to give an opinion on.
Right.
And so I think that I think it's all driven purposely to divide us for that reason, just because of, like you said, if we came together on things that we actually all cared about, change would happen. And
Right.
there are people that don't want change, and those people have influence.
I don't know what your take on it was, Johnny. I don't know if you said like your stance. I just mean, I kind of disagree with you two actually.
Who? Us two?
Them two.
Wow.
My dad or other Mike
About us
and
being
Matt.
divided.
Wow.
About
Not being divided.
other Mike said that we're not really divided, and you kind of said also we're not as divided as it seems like if you listen to social media. And I agree. I don't think we're as divided as like if you're like chronically online, you would think civil wars around the
Like
corner,
John, if you only
revolutions
if you
around the
only get your
corner.
news from
Yeah,
TikTok,
from
you
doom
think
scrolling.
that- you
Right,
think
right,
that
right.
there's
If you're doom
no-
scrolling, you will think it's like
Yeah.
you think there's-
doomsday.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I do think that the divide in the country is a bit more real than to other Mike's point, right? I think it used to be that you just disagreed about things, certain things, whatever. But everybody kind of was like, yeah, well, but they're a nice person and that's fine. Like I can get along with them. We disagree about this political thing, but fine. But I think this is really downstream of education, like, and by education I mean the entire. I think, and this is just a personal stance. This isn't like factual, whatever. That like the education of the country has been completely corrupted intentionally by some nefarious. I don't know. I'm not saying it's like a cabal of like Satanists or anything. Just like there has been a movement, right, towards moralizing like political arguments that really aren't moral arguments, where now everything is a moral argument. And when everything's a moral argument, right, people don't leave a thing going, I disagree with them, they disagree with me, but we both have families, we love our families, I believe that they don't mean me ill will and I don't mean them ill will.
If you believe this, you have to be
Now
a
it's like,
terrible
if you
person.
believe this thing, you're a bad person.
Right. Yeah.
Despite all of the evidence that you aren't.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that we might have just had a nice conversation. Despite the fact that I might know your family. No, you have a family and you love your family. Like a million things, right? But it's like, no, but now you're a bad person, right?
I think that's it's. I don't know if you put it into a percentage, like do you think that's the?
I think it's a
prevalent
growing
I
percentage.
think-
I think
I
it's
mean,
getting worse.
That's kind of
I think it's
what
a
I-
growing percentage. Like it's not that right now we're actually 75% divided, right? Like truly divided. And it's hard to just make a random percentage. Let's say maybe right now in real life, right? If you look online, it's 75%. In real life, it's like 30, 25, 20, which is manageable. And maybe there's always probably
15
been a
years
group.
ago, it
There's
was-
always been a group that is like truly. But I think we're rapidly getting more and more divided. Like, and I think about, just because I was listening to a thing last night about it, when you look at certain things, right? And I mean, there's like the political stuff aside, just because we talk about politics and it's like, it becomes much harder because like there are, I know I just said like that politics are, don't always have to be like morally founded.
Yeah.
And I still agree with that, but there are also things in politics that need to be morally grounded. But if you look at like the I guess men versus like women divide, if we can call it that. Not that I really think, I think men versus women there really isn't. I think this is like a very astroturfed, chronically online thing. But there are a lot of kids who listen to guys like Andrew Tate, and something's wrong there, right? You know what I mean? Like I don't know that much about Andrew Tate. I'm not gonna like disparage him, but seeing some of his things, it's like if he has that big of a following, something is going awry.
Right.
That is true. Like he wouldn't have a following. It's one thing if it's like, oh, it's all fake views and stuff, but that can't be true because he's made money off of it and he's, like that doesn't make sense. So there is some movements that do affect how it really exists to be.
What is his following? Like
generally young men, like
millions,
teenagers.
billions?
It's in
millions.
the millions.
Definitely in the millions.
It's
And
high.
you think like those millions of people that follow him, like really in their hearts believe that, or
I think that you don't
because
follow.
they're-
I don't know. It's hard to
because
say.
they're part of that.
Look, I
clan.
can't-
To me, the things that he says are so egregious that if you don't believe them, you're not following him. Because it's not like he provides any other value outside of reinforcing those.
Because it's one thing
beliefs.
to speak about, like you're with that group and you're accepted because you have the same, you put the same comments in the things, and because people love that, right? They want to see
Community.
Yeah, they're looking
Right?
for a community. Exactly.
But
Yeah, but once you become in that community, that becomes your community.
How much of it do they really start to believe, and how much of it is just because they're in that clique? Like outside of that,
I kinda
are
know
they-
what you
are they-
mean.
Like, are they really?
Are you saying
shunning
like a cult?
Everybody that's against them, like, are they really shunning their family, friends that
Right.
don't agree, other people, co-workers? Are they really
So,
doing that, or are they just when they're in that clique they feel comfortable?
Well, I'm just using a particular.
No, I'm just saying.
No, but it's hard to
when-
say because I don't think.
I
when
think
you
you bring
think
up a
of
good point. No, I think you
I
bring
don't-
up a good point. I think what you were saying is what I agree with 100%, except for the education part. I think it's more pushed by media than education. I think, I'm going through the educational system, I didn't really feel that pressure. Online, you definitely feel that pressure.
Fair enough.
Watching the news, you definitely feel that pressure. That was kind of what I brought up before we were recording, where I was like, I agree with other Mike except for the fact that there are certain things that people just will not reconcile on and will hate you over.
That's true. But that'll always exist.
Because they find it a moral issue, and I think that recent trends for social media and for the news is to push things to make things into moral arguments, and similar like with the Andrew Tate thing, that was his whole thing. It's like, it's not just like, oh, I like this way of life and this way of life led me to prosperity and I want to teach you. It's like, no, if you don't do what I do, you literally are not a man.
Right.
You cannot
right.
call
I
yourself
agree.
a
I agree
man
with you there.
and
That's
not
what
do what I do.
That's what the largest issue is with that. But the fact that he has millions of followers, there is something
I think
there.
it's an interesting point of how many people just feel comfortable there, and how many people are actually
Take it
like
and move it
are
into their
actually
real lives.
like, no, yeah, I'm not.
Because I always when I think, like, when you think about the world, right? Like, we always say, the world is divided, right? Everybody's fighting. But if aliens came down
We'd all-
and wanted to take over the world, would the world come
We'd figure
together?
it out.
I think so.
We'd
So
figure
in the
it out.
same vein, like,
Really?
these millions,
I think we would.
Against aliens?
these millions of
Yeah.
people,
I think we would.
Yeah.
a lot
At
of
least for the time. At least if there's an invasion, if it's like
they're
a,
threatening
if it's an
us,
imminent
yeah,
threat,
if they're
I feel like-
threatening us,
if they just say aliens exist, I don't think tomorrow it's kumbaya. If a mothership comes down
and they're like, we're taking you
and it
over.
lands over every major
If
continent,
it was
I
Independence
feel like
Day,
I feel like majority
people
would, but
people-
most people wouldn't.
No.
a
If
lot,
it
a
was
lot,
an-
not
no,
sorry,
no,
not most,
no,
not most.
Alien invasion, everybody's fighting.
if there was an
Really?
Independence Day,
Yeah. For
Wow.
protection of humanity.
I think certainly
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's all it's a huge problem for everybody, and you're like, look, we disagree
That-
on so many things,
But this we agree
if we
on, right?
don't,
Like,
that would
if we
be
don't get
interesting
along
to
right
see.
now, we both die.
I would love to
lose
see
my family,
liberals
you
and
you
everybody
lose yours.
else like,
Yeah.
Let's
absolutely.
go.
If they're coming in with a,
think
with
I
a
would.
threat,
The only people that wouldn't would be
all of
people
humanity.
who are like, I think this is a losing battle, and I'm going to try to be
Yeah,
on their
yeah, yeah.
side.
Try and join
But that's
their side.
already that's
that's
not
why,
that's a
like-
new issue now. Now
yeah.
if it's like, oh, we got
Wow.
alien people who are trading to be on the alien side. That's a separate issue.
That's
I think like
interesting.
I think there's no more like, oh, I'm a Christian, you're a Muslim,
Yeah.
Okay.
because they're like, look,
Wow.
we both. It won't
Now-
matter
now
in a
this-
day
right.
if
I
they
would
blow
think-
us up.
I would
Find
really-
out who's right.
Now
I
we're-
would
Yeah, right.
Now
We're
we're
gonna find out
Earthlings,
who's
and
right.
we have to fight this other thing.
I agree with
Yeah.
that.
Because my thing is like,
That's a-
I think that's a good point.
That's
I
shocking.
think that's a good point.
When there's a tragedy someplace, right, in a city or in a state, or
People come
whatever,
together. It's like a known.
People come together. So you think I'm saying, like, are those people really?
I think
because
you have
they
a good
listen to
point.
this
I think
guy
that's- I think
that's a
walking
very
away
good
and
point.
saying, I'm not going to help anybody because I don't like their attitudes. You know
That-
what I mean?
I see. I see
Or
your
they're
point.
gonna
I look
buy,
forward to
the
that.
Boston Strong shirt.
You look forward
So-
to the alien invasion?
yeah, because that's a great way to like
Not if we don't
test
survive
this out. You said something 2 seconds ago that I didn't do in my opening statement because I'm not the opening statement guy, and I got thrown under the bus there.
Sorry.
But no, it's fine. But you brought it in, and it maybe, and it was the conversation you guys had. So one of my confusions with this whole like divide thing is I feel like all the things now it's dumb things we're divided on. Like in a sense, then I mean they have some merit, but because like for the world's history, it was always like a religion thing. It was always like a cultural thing, like all these wars.
The moral things,
Right.
It was always
right.
moral balance.
And you said the word religion. Religion's always been a big reason for war between people and culture.
Because it's
and
a
now,
decision
but
making.
Which is
now,
fundamentally
right
It's
now,
a moral argument.
in this country, we're not even fighting about those things that are big
they're
anymore.
making
What I'm
them
saying is
into
they
moral
made
arguments.
and I
Right.
I think there's a larger conversation here about the way that when people started, I think, and this isn't like there might be research, who knows, but this is just my take. When religion started going away, right?
Yeah.
The need for people to
Define
have that
morality.
higher, call it a higher power, whatever, higher authority maybe is a better word. That didn't go away. Like there's some need,
Right. You
in
need
at least
something.
like the masses, right? Like maybe an individual person, each of them can all say, I don't really need that. It's just a thing I believe in. But like people need that.
Right.
So
Of
that
course.
went away.
Yeah.
Right. En masse, because like scientific revolution, enlightenment, like there's a bunch of reasons. But I think that people didn't realize, and by people I just mean like en masse humanity,
Right.
that it would be replaced by something. And that thing that it was replaced by would have the same like
Passion.
that passion that people have, like true believers in their religion will die for their religion. Like that's the like
Yeah,
martyrs is like
100%.
a thing
Yeah.
for their religion.
Right.
And nobody realized like, well, now if you're like, I'm an atheist and I'm a super devout Democrat or
That's-
Republican.
exactly.
That's just as bad.
That's now what it is.
And now what I was like what Matt said, what I was saying is that everything now is a moral issue. Like,
Right.
and people are gonna get mad about this, I bet, but I don't at the core think that illegal immigration is a moral argument. I don't.
100%.
Right? Unless you want to talk about like you'd have to say is it immoral to do an illegal thing, right? Which I don't consider illegal immigrants to be immoral people.
No. Not
And
at
I
all.
don't think anybody, I mean some people do, but like I think by and large nobody does.
Right.
But it's clearly marketed as if you are against illegal immigration,
Yeah.
you hate people.
You hate people, right?
And if you're for it, you love people.
Right.
And so that's putting a moral thing on something that's
Yeah.
like it's legal. You know what I mean? It's there's an economic argument. Like there's a million other things
That's my
that
argument.
come before. It's like this is a moral imperative.
right.
If you don't believe in illegal immigration, you hate people and you want these people to die, and that's an issue.
Yeah.
And they do that with everything.
Everything now.
Everything. All the social things.
Yeah.
It's like, look, if I don't think a man can become a woman or a woman can become a man, we can talk about what that means with like semantic arguments about what does it mean to be a man, what does it mean to be a woman, what does it mean to change,
No, but
like
then-
is it a spectrum? But then if I say that, right, the majority of the narrative on the left, maybe not every person believes this, they will go, you're a bigot and you
Right.
hate those people,
Right.
and that cannot
That's
be,
not-
that
And it
can't
doesn't-
work.
it doesn't-
That's not it.
That is the problem, right? Because
Right.
That's what I think.
It's everything comes down to them saying, if you don't believe what I believe in, you're evil.
Right.
Right.
And
I do want to say this
and
though.
I think-
That is a
Republicans
problem. They do
on
the
this,
same thing.
they do the same thing.
They do
This
the
is
name-
one thing
they
where I
do the
think it's
name
honestly,
calling.
it's like
It's across the
They
board.
do-
Straight down the
they
middle.
do
It's
name
everybody.
calling.
And I
I hate
think-
all of that stuff.
I-
Because that's the thing that really, like, I'm not evil for having my beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the thing that really where I say, and I think it's done by the politicians and amplified by the press.
yeah,
Right?
that's true.
It's amplified by the press. Like calling somebody Hitler has now made Hitler like
Doesn't mean anything.
Hitler's
anymore.
less evil.
Nazi doesn't mean anything
doesn't mean
anymore.
anything.
Like Nazis used to be evil.
It was
I
evil.
think-
now
They're not evil
now
anymore.
that word doesn't
Yeah.
mean
It
anything.
It's
just
nothing
means you're
now.
Anything.
It means you're a person that
I
doesn't
think
believe in
you-
what I
You
believe.
Can
you
I-
disagree with me.
I think you.
Can
nuts.
a woman
I
can a
think-
woman take a man's organ, not like kidney,
Yeah.
Yes.
like
I
that's
think-
They're all the same. Yeah.
well, I know they're the same, but can they?
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
are they?
Yeah, I think hearts is a problem.
Hearts, really? That's the one I
There's a
thought
side-
could work.
different size.
No, because they're different
size.
sizes. Men's hearts are
But
larger,
I
and
think-
I think
I
there's an
think it's
issue
a-
with fitting sometimes.
Okay.
Like a larger woman
Right,
could
maybe.
use a smaller man's heart.
Okay.
So like
I
it's
think-
I'm not like it's not that the sex prohibits it,
Right.
but there's a size difference
think-
that doesn't
I
exist.
think
But
you
yes,
bring
organs
up-
can be
Organs
men or
could be
women.
I
men or
think
women.
you bring
Okay.
up. I think
Except
you bring up a
ovaries.
good way to describe
Depends on
it
who you
with
ask.
saying like, you know, with transgenderism, saying like, you have one belief and we could sit down and have a conversation. Maybe it's a spectrum, like that kind of thing. Is because the reason for that divide, I think it's exemplified mostly there, is because
Really
that conversation leads to more understanding on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
So the more that you could prevent that conversation from ever even happening, the more that you can keep
better, the
people
more divided.
separated.
Yeah.
And so like that's why it's like, yeah, I have to hate you if you don't believe the same thing as me, because if we were to sit down and talk about it and we understood each other's perspectives, we might just agree.
Mm-hmm.
And
we
that
think
can
pol-
never happen.
Do we think politicians want to keep us divided?
Yeah.
100%.
But it doesn't even matter.
Absolutely.
Even if you can't come to an agreement, that's my point. Like,
It's okay
No,
to
but
not
an
agree.
agreement- An agreement. I mean, an
He's saying
agreement in terms.
well, he's just
of-
saying the shouting down part means no conversation happens at all.
Right. Right.
Which is the larger
then-
problem than like
And I'm not saying
to both
people
have a
will always
conversation and
agree.
you both leave thinking
But
what
I'm
you
saying-
thought, but you're like, but I get where they're
If
coming
you
from.
end
I feel like most of the world is like me, and here's my. I will use transgender, right? I have no problem with them, right? Being
Did Johnny just say he was a transgender?
He said- people I was like,
I'm
He
coming.
did say that.
I'm
He
coming
It
out
did
of
a- it did a little
no,
bit.
He did say that.
Did I really?
You said most
You-
people
the
are like
way
me,
you
like a
said it.
transgender.
I know what you meant, but you
Okay, I gotcha.
It's a
But like,
technical.
I have no problem with a transgender, and I don't, if they want to be a he to a she to a he, whatever, right? But then where I do draw the line is like a sport thing, and I'm against that,
Right.
Right? So you do what you want to do, and I support you, and I have no problem. But now you want to invade this, and I'm
And
against that.
people don't want to have that
Right.
conversation with you.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't really give a shit.
Where I think you can
Right?
reasonably, I think that people can reasonably find a conclusion, even though there will be disagreements on both sides. People can reasonably find a conclusion by having a conversation about that.
And that's what I
they
think most
won't-
people would.
won't have the conversation because they're being told if just just allowing that conversation to happen means that you are enabling someone who's evil on both sides.
Yeah.
But it just,
Another good like example of this being, I think, like the divide being so maybe not artificial, because this is a real divide, but like the fact that there really isn't productive conversation about it is indicative of the problem more so than the problem itself, is like gun control, right? Because like I don't own a gun. I'm like from New York. It's very difficult if I wanted to. Okay. Not gonna get into
you
it.
can't carry it.
Not gonna get into it. Fine.
carry it.
Whatever. But the argument about gun control is so ridiculous because it's like one side wants guns and does not want bad things to happen with guns. The other side doesn't want guns and doesn't want bad things to happen with guns. And it's like we already mostly agree. Everybody already mostly agrees.
Right.
But
we don't want bad things to happen.
right. Nobody like there's a straw man thing of like, no, people who want guns or like super pro
are okay with allowing
Second Amendment.
the
They're
bad
okay
things
with
to
people
happen.
getting killed. Like
Yeah.
they want kids to get shot in schools, and it's like nobody thinks that.
No one wants that.
Nobody. I mean, 0.00001%, and that minority
Right.
is the Columbine shooters. Like that's
And
it.
that's the thing. The people who want guns that have guns legally aren't any of the people that have done anything bad with the gun. It's the
That
people
too.
that went and got the guns because they shouldn't have guns and legally.
But I just
got
mean, it
them.
seems like there could be such a productive argument,
Right, let's
when
say-
it comes
Yeah,
to
but
like,
the
look, we
problem
both
is-
think it's bad when guns are used to bad ends.
Right.
I just think
Let's figure out how to
like
deter it.
I just think as a right. What is the
Without
middle
getting rid
ground
of
that we
it.
can
Right.
reach? That's like, look, you're very like not you. I just mean because I'm like consider me pro gun, him anti gun. I'm like you're more leading with empathy, and you're saying some people have died by guns, and I think it's just the easiest and best way to do it is to get rid of all guns. And I go, I think everybody should have a gun because it's the safest you can be because other people will own guns.
Right.
Where do we meet in the middle? But instead, it's like you're evil
Right.
for wanting guns, right? And I think maybe not you're evil, but that there's a a full misunderstanding of what it means to own a gun.
Right.
That I'm like, no, you don't get it. You think to own a gun is to be a bad person.
Right.
That's where you're leading from,
This one,
and that's wrong
This
too.
one is
Because you
particular.
could have that conversation on an individual level,
Right.
Right. But the problem is that we've allowed the government to control everything in our lives.
Yep.
They can't solve problems.
No.
Not because they can't. They won't
They
solve
won't.
problems.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they solve problems, they can't make the money they make. anymore.
Exactly.
They can't do the things they do. They don't
what's
have the power.
funny
Right.
about this topic specifically is it shows to me it shows the media influence so much because the conversation is still called gun control, but nobody's talking about gun control. That would be the middle ground. It would be like, we don't want bad things to happen, so we have to control guns in some way. But the conversation now is keep them or get rid of them.
Yeah,
And-
pretty much.
And yet we still sit here and call it gun control as if that's the narrative that's happening at all. And I think that's the time, that's a way where you could see the media manipulated a conversation so much.
I agree.
Where they kept the title, they call it gun control, but we're not having discussions about actually controlling access to guns or having conversations about whether or not anybody should own a gun at all.
Yeah, the argument is kind of like, are guns good or are guns bad? And
Right,
it's like, this is
exactly.
not, nothing fruitful will ever
To the-
come of this.
To the point that you made earlier, I don't know if it was in this one or a previous one, but that's bleeding back, right? You know, at the political level, they set an agenda, right? One side wants something and the other side wants something else. The media carries that through, and then the education system. A lot of these people,
I think the education
because
system-
they lean in a certain way, also impress some. Maybe not gun control so much, but there's other things that they do, try to impress upon students, right? And in their teachings, and it's not that's a completely, you know, that's what's been going on for the last 40 years, right? And that's why we feel like we're at the point we're at. But you go to inner parts of the country, people just get along.
So much.
People get along. Like
So much.
You know, you get along with people. You get along with different people. Like we all individually get along with different people. Like there's nobody in my life that I've turned away because of their political.
Because most of those people
Yeah.
are
You know?
hardworking family people, and that's where the morals are. I go to work, I make my money, I support my family. That's my line.
That's
That's
what they-
Right.
what
and,
matters.
and most people are good people.
right? And
Most
that's
people.
where
Like,
it's at.
like, I don't know by a wide margin, but I think a pretty good margin. 80-20. You know, I mean,
I'd say 90-10.
right?
I
90-10.
think
Like
it's-
most
I'd say
people
90-10.
are genuinely at least decent. Like, maybe
even-
not their,
even people
you know,
who
not
just-
everybody's
they
saints,
just
but
wanna
they're
live their
decent
life,
people
even
who want to
if
live their
left
life
alone.
But
and they
there's
want
so many-
Even a
themselves
lot
and
of
their
the-
family to do
even a
well.
lot of the
There's so
times
many people
when-
in this world now who look at the issues in the world and if they have families, they look back at their families and say, unless these issues are fixed, my kids are going to grow up in a horrible
It'll
world,
be
and they're
worse.
going to be messed up themselves. Meanwhile, like, listen, we've all grown up in different times, and like the world wasn't ever great then either. And we've all grown. I like to think we're all pretty good in our lives with all that stuff. But people focus so much on that now. It's kind of sad.
It is sad.
It's all fear mongering. It's all
Yeah,
fear mongering.
that's what I think it is.
To keep certain people in power.
Yeah.
That's what that's. I think that's mostly what it is. That's driving.
Yeah.
it.
I
Well, see,
think
this
it's
is the
the
only way I
stuff-
disagree.
Listen to that stuff.
Like I said, I think most people are genuinely good people. Why I think education is more of the problem than media is because media preys on people who already, at least they're like thinking a little bit.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you're an adult.
You don't watch the news
you're
as a
watching
kid.
the news and you're
I never
wrong,
watched
like,
a kid as a child.
You know what I
Like,
mean?
change.
Right. But like education starts when you're 4,
Earlier.
5, right?
Earlier.
I mean, if you want to say education is
Oh,
like
yeah.
generally learning things, I
Right,
just mean
right.
like school,
Right, 5,
schooling,
5,
like an
yeah.
academic. And look, can I point to like a specific thing that was like indoctrinated? Not necessarily, but I think one, and this is just off the top of my head, going back to the Andrew Tate thing. And don't get me wrong, I was a pretty bad kid in school, so like I had what was coming to me. You know what I mean? But as a kid, I noticed there was a clear bias, and I'm not saying this is like taught by the education department or anything like that, but I think this probably exists throughout a lot of, definitely middle school, maybe as far as up. There was a clear disconnect between the way guys and girls were treated in school.
I could see
There
that.
just was.
Well, you had
For
that.
me.
You had that.
I'm saying I
problem
was
in
a
grammar
bad
school.
Right, and I'm saying I was a bad kid, so
Especially
I don't want to
with
use myself
particular
as a thing.
Teacher, right? Who is
Yeah.
effectively she came out of the hippie.
Well,
movement,
I think it's been a thing that's been going on. That's like
and
men,
She promoted the women,
right? Which is
the
like,
women, the girls really.
but this thing, there's an academic argument about oppression, right? That can be had at the college level about do men en masse
But you don't
oppress
wanna
women
start
en
it
masse?
until-
There's an argument to be had there, sure, right? I mean, you can. I think at the upper level, like when you're an adult, I think you should be able to argue about anything, even if it sounds completely ridiculous. You can have that conversation. But when that bleeds in, when you send somebody through college, and they learn about all this oppression that women have suffered, and the way that they're taught to be small around men, and all these things, and then they become a second grade teacher, they're now imposing that view on second graders who don't understand any of it, and are just getting these lessons that they don't know, and they're not presented as like the reason why I'm harsher on you and not on them is because you're a man, and men generally have had this advantage and this privilege in life, and I want this this young girl to not have to deal with what I dealt with when I was a kid.
Right.
They don't say that.
Right.
They just yell at you and say like, hey, you're being rambunctious, you're annoying this girl more than whatever. Right. And it's just something like I experienced. And again, I'm saying I was a pretty bad kid, so I'm sure I had what was coming to me. But it was very clear throughout my school, like not even just with me. And I think, and again, the reason why I'm saying academic is because I do think that I don't know. We've talked about we definitely talked about this on a podcast where it's like the oppressed versus the oppressor is like this postmodern, and it bleeds through all the liberal arts. And people start, you go through college and whatever, and you feel that way. And it's impossible to not take that out
of course.
in a classroom. So that's where like you get taught this thing, and then you're like, well, no, I want the world to operate in the way I was taught it should. Right. And it's like, okay, but they might have been wrong. Right? Like that's possible. Yeah. Or maybe they weren't wrong, but maybe what they were talking about was a conversation for, the large scale political machinations, not how you should treat. Yep. And I'm saying guys, girls, like look at like recently with all the like at colleges when they do segregated graduations. Right? And I think that's stupid. But in college, if as an adult you feel the need to do that, like I'm not really going to argue with it. I think it's bad. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's beneficial to anybody. But now consider the person who goes through all this, does the segregated thing, and they're taught and they learn like at the highest level. They think this is the highest thing I'll learn. Yeah. And it's like, no, this should be segregated, like whatever. And then they go and teach a second grade class. How are they gonna go and say, no, the white kid and the black kid in this class don't like it's the exact same thing? How are you not gonna say? I think they might need a little bit more help because they're historically oppressed. You're gonna do that, and that's reasonable, but that doesn't make the kids better. That doesn't help the second graders who are children and don't understand any of this stuff.
That's where
I come from with the
my
education.
point against
of it.
that is outside of just the fact of personal experience, though I do agree with you on the boys and girls things in grammar school. Although I was also a bad kid, so we're
Right.
two saying the same thing. But my 2 points against it,
kid.
first of all, is just the general thing that like anybody would say is you went through college. We disagree on a lot of things. I went through college, right? I have a lot of friends that I don't see eye to eye on everything. In college, went through college, right. So like, and we went to school together, and we came out believing different things, right? The second point is on why I think it's more the media than education. Why education shouldn't really foot the blame for this, and in fact, that's more of a thing for the media to detract attention away from the media. Is nobody besides things that kids do, besides like generally mean kids or kids who like. Nobody gets along more than children do.
True.
In terms of it, like
They
they're not
don't
having
care.
debates on.
No.
They don't care about any of it. So
Until they start to be told that they
to-
shouldn't be getting
but-
along.
They
But
don't
the-
know color.
but-
They don't know
but
anything.
the argument you're making is as they're going
didn't
through
make that
school
argument, I'm just
as
saying.
young. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say you, but in general, people are making is as they're young, they're being told these things. Except for they don't believe a second of it because they all get along until they develop opinions of their own by watching the media, and then it starts to
but
become a big problem.
I just think it starts earlier.
I think that's. I think you
some
could
people-
say that. I think you
Education,
could
yeah.
say that. I disagree, and like I said, I think that the only
Especially-
reason it's important.
I'd
to
say it's
disagree, 'cause
education
usually-
surrounding
Usually,
media.
I would just say.
I would say, Matt, that don't have as much guidance at home, right? Or maybe
Yeah.
the parents don't have a leaning one way or another and don't really care
way.
to talk about it.
Right.
The kids are being taught this stuff. That's where they'll get their opinions
Right.
from
I-
as they grow up.
And-
Even unconsciously.
And
Yeah.
the only reason, and like I said, the only reason, I don't want to say that it's an invalid argument altogether, that it's not a conversation to have. The reason that I think that it's important to stop the conversation there is because you are now effectively taking blame away from the media. And so you're now
you're
saying...
I'm not taking blame away. I think the media has a
It-
role.
it's-
I just think the
it's
fundamental
like-
is
it's-
I
but
think it's
notice-
education's
levels.
more
Starts
to
early.
blame.
You got grammar
But how
school
long
kids
did you
aren't
just talk
watching the
about?
news.
But
Grammar school
notice,
kids aren't
but
watching the
notice
news.
how long did you talk about education? How long have we actually debated on media during this?
Well, 'cause
You
we're adults and
actively-
that's
but I'm
when
saying
once you get
actively
here,
in this
we're through
conversation,
the education
you
thing.
have shifted it towards education instead of us just saying the entire podcast about how media is doing this. You're now taking time away from having that conversation to talk about education, which is definitely
I think it's more important.
I think it's dramatically less of an effect that media is because, like I said, kids get along. Kids are not becoming hateful.
No,
Yeah,
I know.
but
I don't.
it's
But
education
I
as
feel like
you
you're
move
kind of
up.
saying kids aren't the issue. I don't think kids are the issue. I think they're being taught
Education
bad
as you
things.
go through.
Again, but
Younger
then,
at
but
like
then
4 or 5 years
again,
old.
when I have gone through school and you've gone through
Yeah.
school and
Look how
we have
damaged you
friends
are.
and people and that we disagree with that we clearly were not indoctrinated.
Well, look,
to
they don't
one
get
ideology
everybody.
or another one.
You know what I mean?
But,
Matt, I know
but I don't know anybody
You
who I can
always
sit here
defend
and
the
say
education system.
Matt loves education.
I hate the
true.
education system.
You
I,
always
I
defend
do.
the
I,
education
You
system.
I
love
think it has
education.
problems.
I mean, it
I
starts.
think the
If it
education.
starts with kids that are 4,
I
5,
think-
6 years old who aren't going home and watching the news, probably aren't on social media yet, right?
Right,
That
right.
starts to formulate their opinions. Then when they start to look at that stuff, then they know where they're going. They're going where they're comfortable. Where the teacher said, "Well, this is where
Sure.
your zone
And-
is going to be."
and again,
so we're just saying
I
they're
think
a
it's
part
a
of
valid
it.
argument.
Media certainly has
Has a role.
and it has a role on adults.
I think-
really,
I
right?
think
it has
it's-
a role on adults, but I think more and more the education
Right.
system is starting to take that on earlier
I'm
and
not
earlier
saying it's a-
and putting it into these kids' heads.
Setting a foundation for
Yeah,
it all.
Right,
and-
right.
and then
I understand
move
all
on.
of that. I'm not saying that it's not a
So we could talk
conversation
media
that
too
you
for
can
another
have,
hour
right?
if you like. But
But
education is
I'm
part
not,
of the
and
problem.
I defend education in this sense because again, it's another detractor. Where if you start having the conversation on education is bad because of indoctrination, you're now forgetting about the million other things that are much more important that make the education system in this country horrible. Indoctrination is far.
Oh, we
No,
can.
no,
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 there's
no,
a
no,
there's
no,
a
no,
lot
no.
more
But
things.
now
I'm not
saying,
talking
but
about
you're
this
saying I always
specific
defend
topic.
education. I've said many
We're
times
but
I
I'm
don't
saying
think the
on
education
this
system.
But this is
particular-
just an
on this
unrelated
particular
topic
topic.
about education.
Right.
On this topic, I'll defend education because it is not the most important conversation about the divide, nor is it the most important
Yes, it
conversation
is. Well, I
just
about
disagree with you.
Yes, it
education
is.
to
It's
have.
the-
I get what you're saying.
It-
I
it-
just disagree.
Right,
with you.
and
I just think it
and
is.
sure,
It
but
sets
I
the
think
foundation
that
for
I
these
think that
kids,
again.
and then as they grow up and they start to get social media, they know which sites they want to feel
Yeah.
comfortable.
But I
on.
think-
when they watch the news, they know which news channels. They know the people they
Yeah.
want to hang out with
I
because
think
they were
disagreeing
told
adults-
as 2, 3,
It
4,
opens the
5
door.
And
years old.
agreeing children is enough to prove if everybody was indoctrinated by the same system, there wouldn't be disagreeing adults. It's not like everybody who thinks differently than what the education system is telling them.
But
is
I don't
so
think it's like the
bad.
stranglehold
No,
indoctrination
yeah.
thing.
There
It's
are
just
outside influences.
That
right?
never-
I feel like I gave a pretty
You're
good
saying on,
example.
like an individual.
I feel like I
level.
gave a pretty good example of how where I really think it starts. Right.
Right.
College, like let's say 40 years ago, there's this like postmodern movement towards the oppressed. And I think this is like there's a lot of different things. Right. If you study just mathematics, this won't affect you. Right. But when it becomes education, becomes a cycle. It's like you're going to study how to teach kids. And the thing you're learning, like the liberal arts thing is saying, well, and this is just part of college, and this is inarguable that this is the mainstream narrative, is that women have been oppressed by men
Right.
for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And they just got the right to vote, like in America, 100 years ago, and there's still like the pay gap.
Yeah.
Like
I
that's
understand
not
what you're
that's
saying.
not disregarded in college. That's considered a fact.
Right.
And then the person who goes through that schooling as an adult now, they hear this, and I don't think they all reject it. I think a lot of people, and that's fine to agree with it. It's a thing you're taught. Is it always right? Maybe not, but it's a thing you learned. And what I'm saying, where the issue comes in, is that person then goes and teaches second graders,
whispered in ears.
and they're looking at it, and they're saying in their head, or they're thinking, maybe even subconsciously, women have had it so hard,
Yeah.
men have had it better, and now this little boy is bullying this little girl, and is affecting her ability to become a fully functioning woman, right? Is that the best way to look at it, right? Should little boys bully little girls? No. But is that really what's happening?
Right.
Or is a teacher very primed to think women have had it so hard,
Right.
and this is how it starts. This is finally my opportunity to exact the change I was taught was so wrong in the world.
Whisper
I
in
have
the
this
ear.
opportunity for 10, I can teach 15 boys right now that they should listen to the girls in class.
Right.
So I'm going to have girl talking hour. Not that this is a real thing. I'm just saying
No,
as an
right.
example.
I understand.
That
what you're
is the
saying.
kind of thing
We have that in my
people
house.
get taught when they're 4, and that affects them because they're 4.
Right.
And now a little boy learns, he goes home and he's like, I had to shut up today for an hour
No, I
to
see-
let the girls
I-
talk
I
because the
see-
boys were talking too loud.
I see now where the disagreement is, because while I think that happens, I think for it to happen to make a margin on the scale to make a margin, I think most teachers have reason. I think most teachers separate what they learn in college from what they're teaching.
See, I disagree with that
Right.
entirely.
That I think is where the basis of the argument is. I think that on scale, I think you think this is happening a lot more than I think this is
think-
happening.
I
That's
think
fair.
And that's kind
That's
of
fair.
where the disagreement
That's
is.
fair.
Right.
I think in
I
Michael
understand where that comes from.
in Mike's case, how you say they don't bring it. I think if it's these kind of situations, they bring it back to the back where they are. Like
It's
if
almost
you-
impossible
Yeah,
not to.
if you stand, if you have an agenda you're standing for, you
where he's
bring
coming
that
from, where it's so
as
where
early
it's
as you
so
can
much-
into your career.
where it's so much like somebody is going to college and they're taking everything they went to college and they are now like, I can teach this.
And
I
most
can teach the
people
children
do,
the same-
but-
I disagree. That's
No,
where
most
the,
people
because they
do-
think that's the moral
Right.
good.
Right,
Most
right.
people
I understand
do.
the argument. No, I understand the argument.
Matt,
completely.
what you're
I'm
saying,
I
most
disagree,
people do
but I
do.
understand the.
But
You
there's
disagree on the
people-
scale.
Right.
But these people who want to make change
I
and
believe
think
it
they're right and
happens.
wrong, they're bringing that all the way back to the beginning.
I believe it happens.
And that's those are the
Right.
problem people in the
I
world.
believe
Those are the people in today's world, on the
I-
media, on social media, in the streets. They're trying to make a change in all the wrong ways, and that I think where Michael's going.
Again,
I mean-
I understand the argument, and I believe it happens. I think that the disagreement comes in where, to me, this happens so little that it cannot make a marginal difference in the public. Now, the other argument
yeah.
that you guys are saying is it
that it happens.
actually happens very often.
Right.
That's where I kind of just disagree.
I mean, Matt, I went to school. I was in middle school 20 years. This is before all of this stuff went big.
Yeah, because you graduated the year before me. I remember
Went
that.
big. And look, and there's it's one thing about like me when I was younger being like a bad kid in class and
Yeah,
talking.
yeah. Right,
Don't get me wrong. But I was legitimately like railroaded for academic awards because I happened to be like a guy or whatever. And like, yeah, I talked and stuff, but I had good grades.
Yeah.
But I got railroaded.
No, I
Because
again,
it was like, well, he's kind of a dick.
yeah.
And these girls try really hard.
no,
And they have good grades. He just has better grades, but he's a dick. And it's like, that's not. I just
again,
had better grades.
It happens. I would never.
Right.
disagree
Look,
with
I
that.
know
But
using
I-
using one anecdotal,
think-
I get it.
Right,
I just
right,
think
right.
it does happen way more than
And
you
that's-
think.
no, and
and I
that's-
think it's evidenced.
That's
And I
fine.
think
And I think it's evidenced by people growing up
It's
and having
happening
these
more
like.
and more. Right.
Yeah, because it's a like a death cycle
Yeah.
where the first person, the first hippie teacher in the 60s who went through college learning all this new stuff, then goes back and they're like, we have this opportunity now to change the world.
Again, I understand the
in a
argument
better way.
completely.
I know. I'm just surprised that you think it really at scale it doesn't exist.
I think at scale, like I said, I think
it exists. I think
the evidence against
education
it is there
system over the last 40 years.
I think it's been a
direction. It's
agreed.
Been, like I said, it started first with these hippie college teachers, and then they became. They taught the next
middle school teachers,
right?
And then those kids grew up a little.
On. In 40 years, now you have the whole, not the whole, but a large majority of the education system.
I think it's a fair point. I think it's a fair point.
And I think if you look at the unions and all of that stuff and what they're told to teach and all of that, I think it's part of almost part of the curriculum in the sense that they teach certain things.
I mean, Matt, if I can just ask you one thing, because I know we're kind of run over time, so we can end about here.
So we can end about here. Go ahead.
Well, I just want one question, right? So, using DEI, right, as a roadmap, or let's say, because DEI is more of a thing that you have to do, but what's the there's an academic term for it, but let's just use DEI. You're telling me that people are gonna go through college and everything and learn about all this, and they might some people might disagree. I disagree. I went to college. I disagree with DEI. But there's a lot of people. They're going to hear about all this and say, okay, black people or minority people, not just black people, minority people need more opportunity because they've been for so long held back from this, right? They're going to learn this, they're going to believe it, and they're going to believe it's morally good, not only to believe it, but to teach it.
Right.
And that's true, right?
Sure.
When they become, if the ones who go through the education system, and by education, I mean they go to school for education, then they go and teach kids. You think they leave that at the door? And they walk into the class and they're like, nope, I'm treating every person in here based on the content of the character, not the color of their skin. Doesn't matter if you're white or black or brown or whatever.
2 points, right? First of all, yes. I think not.
All right, you're giving a lot of people a lot more strength than I think they have.
But I think that if you become a teacher, you have that understanding. I think that's part of the job. And they have that understanding. I understand that's a big disagreeing point.
Matt,
secondly,
they're fighting over the Pope being left and right.
Secondly, right?
I mean, they're fighting over Popes being left and right. Everybody's left and right nowadays. So.
In America,
no.
In America, they're fighting over the Pope being left and right.
No.
And
they're fighting over
the second thing,
Probably Europe.
The second thing is, I think that similar to how we kind of started this whole conversation, a lot of people don't see it as that serious to them personally. And I think that was kind of where we came in, where it was it becomes this divide because it's now being presented to us as if it's this all or nothing moral argument. And I think that a lot of people, like you said in the beginning, aren't actually like that, don't actually feel that way, and won't actually feel so passionate about a random required core class they took in college to now be like, I have to change these young people's minds in a way that fits with this moral argument that I was
okay.
I mean, those are, again, you could disagree.
No, I'm
it's
not saying,
okay.
what I'm saying is, because one-on-one they might be fine. In the school environment where most people are in agreement with what they're teaching, they're going to go that direction.
I just disagree.
And that is a thing. That is all fact.
You could take the teacher out of the school and sit with the teacher and agree and talk, but when they get together with the rest of their gang, and they know that all of these teachers feel that way, they're going to do that.
And that's just where I disagree. Well, I think that most teachers are just leaving it.
Fine, Matt. I think what you're really overlooking or just not considering is I do not believe for a second that there is a single person going through their bachelor's studies in education, and they go into a classroom about teaching kids, and DEI comes up, and they say, I don't believe in that at all, and I would never teach my kids that.
No, but I think
because if that person says that,
but
every other person in the room and the professor is going to give them the stink eye and say you're a bad person.
It's not that they don't believe in it. It comes back to the not needing for that to be all or nothing. I think that they part of that education course that they're taking isn't just, oh, here's different systems that we do. It's also here's how you stop bias at the door as a teacher.
Right. I think you give them more credit. I think they're taught.
Maybe you could say
I think they're
more
taught,
credit, but I think that's part of the job.
No, not I just mean people having the ability to take a thing that they're taught as a moral issue and say, yeah, I get it. This is right. I agree with everybody in the class right now. DEI is correct, and these people have been oppressed, and they need a little extra. We need to worry about equity more than equality. But when I go to teach my kids in my class, none of this is
Yeah,
all left at the door.
That's the thing.
I just don't think
think,
that's-
and that's fine.
good.
That's
Yeah,
that's a fine.
that's
thing
just a
to disagree
disagreement.
with. But I think yeah.
Okay.
Anyway,
Those are good closing thoughts.
if you just
Ran a
joining
little
in
over.
now,
This was a pretty good one, though. That
go
was good.
back and listen. Matt was completely wrong about everything, and we were all right. I'm just kidding, Matt.
Yeah, thanks.
And as always.
As always, thanks for listening.
Stay angry, annoyed, and amused.